God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on God for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on God for thee.
Que l'on ouvre les portes, let the doors be open. Statements by members. Déclaration de député, the Honourable Member for Oakville North Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, June the 18th, Cameron Fraser DeMoth made his much-anticipated entry to the world. Love to the Moon and Back by his mum, Taylor, and Dad, Fraser. My first grandchild could not have been born to better parents. His Auntie Jill, Uncle Rob, and Cousin Bailey can't wait to meet him, and his great-grandmother Betty is excited to hold the wee bairn in her arms. Taylor, your strength and huge heart will make you an incredible mom. Fraser, I'm so proud of the man you've become. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, and the father you will be. Cameron, you will always be surrounded by so much love and affection. As John Lennon said, before you cross the street, take my hand. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making plans. Beautiful, beautiful boy. Congratulations, Fraser Taylor. May God bless you and we, Cameron. And I know Bonka is smiling down on you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And congratulations, Grandma. She got me in tears. The Honourable Member for Prince George Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Mr. Speaker, community leaders throughout my riding are alarmed by the lack of genuine consultation around caribou and other closures. The recent release of the province's draft winter motorized recreation plan for the South Peace is a direct result of the Caribou Partnership Agreement signed by this Liberal government in 2020. The BC Snowmobile Federation, the Concerned Citizens for Caribou Recovery, and the municipality of Chetwynd have all come out strongly against this proposed plan. It became clear that the recommendations to maintain public access to vitally important areas while conserving caribou habitat were flatly ignored. What did they do with all this sound advice from outdoor experts? They threw it out the window. It's time for this government to recognize its failings with arbitrary land and marine closures. They must ensure decisions made are based on science and sound advice from our communities. These decisions will have a direct impact on the local economy and the way of life, and it looks like more closures are on the way with 30 by 30 and other initiatives supported blindly by this government. It's time for this government to stop ramming through its agenda and starts listening.
The Honourable Member for Pickering, Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize outstanding members from my community of Pickering Uxbridge. Despite the pandemic, these individuals share an unwavering commitment to supporting their communities. Dr. Carly Jensen and Dr. Jennifer Wilson were recently selected by the Dalla Lana School of Public Health as pillars of the pandemic. The pandemic has required exceptional leadership, and Dr. Jensen and Dr. Wilson consistently went the extra mile. Manur Hussain was recently selected as one out of only 3 Parks Canada Youth Ambassadors. Noor will spend the summer engaging with youth across Canada advocating for the protection and conservation of our national parks. And Paul Yang was recently awarded the Globe and Mail's Changemaker Award. As Acting Director of Innovation and Sustainability, Paul has worked hard to phase out the use of plastic straws at all Tim Hortons restaurants across Canada. I want to thank these members of our community for their commitment and for reminding us of the lasting impact individuals can have in our communities and across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, there is some very sad news for our planet. In my region, the Goldboro project is causing discontent. Citizens in Montérégie and the Eastern Townships recently learned that the Alberta gas company Puraday is lobbying the federal government and members of parliament to obtain public funds for the construction of a port and a natural gas liquefaction complex near Halifax. The goal to supply is a German energy company. The company would need close to $1 billion in public funds. And according to a presentation made in December 2020, the gas would travel through pipelines in Quebec. The problem is that it already seems to have reached full capacity. And therefore, if the company obtains financial support from the federal government, other pipelines will have to be built on Quebec territory. This project is environmentally risky and will not bring any economic benefits for Quebec, since the gas would only pass through it. And it brings back bad memories of Energy East. The economic recovery, which we hope will be green, must not be achieved through this type of project.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, I've had the honor of being elected to Parliament 3 times. My commitment to the city I represent has been to stand here at every opportunity and advocate for Toronto, and to do what I can to make this country better by doing better for people. It'll surprise no one when I say the just way to do this is to fight to make sure every Canadian has a safe, affordable place to call home. Nothing in politics is done alone. I acknowledge the ministers and members from all parties and people from the housing sector who have worked together to create the National Housing Strategy. Together, we've legislated the right to housing. We're investing in new homes, we're repairing existing ones, and we're delivering direct support to those in need. This country can end homelessness. We must end homelessness. But yesterday was a tough day in Toronto. The city I love can do better. Our government can do better. We must all do better. The way forward is to find higher ground. It's not through the battleground. We need to build on common ground. That's our duty. That's what we'll do.
The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Robert Alexander, a Canadian hero and a lifelong Owen Sound resident who recently passed away at 91 years of age. Bob loved his community and country. In 1949, he joined the Canadian Army. In 1950, he deployed for a year-long deployment to Korea with the 25th Infantry Brigade, where he served with the Royal Canadian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. After his return from Korea, Bob was a Master Warrant Officer with the Grey and Simcoe Foresters and a proud member of the Royal Canadian Legion. Bob worked for the Ontario Department of Highway and Ministry of Transportation for nearly 35 years. He volunteered with the Grey Roots Museum and received the Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for Lifetime Achievement in 2016. Bob has been a cornerstone in the community, specifically in the antique vehicle, military, and museum circles. Many will remember him from Remembrance Day parades in his 1953 Army Jeep. I'd like to commend Bob for his service to Canada and his community. My deepest condolences to the Alexander family. Bob will certainly be missed by many. Pro Patria, lest we forget.
The Honourable Member for Markham-Stouffville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this time to thank the outstanding doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, other allied health professionals and support staff at Markham-Stouffville Hospital for their heroic and tireless dedication in fighting COVID-19 and for providing the vital care to Markham-Stouffville residents when they needed it most. In total, the hospital has admitted and treated over 600 COVID-19 patients. The very first patient to be intubated was Dr. Larry Pantzer, a much-loved and respected pediatrician who has cared for patients at the hospital for over 30 years. Dr. Pantzer's fight with COVID-19 was not easy, but thanks to the expert care he received at Markham-Stouffville Hospital, he is home with his family. I am sure that for the entire team at Markham-Stouffville Hospital, this has been the most challenging time of your careers. On behalf of the residents of our community, I want to thank you for your skill and incredibly demanding work during this difficult time. We are proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, summer is off to a fast start in Etobicoke Lakeshore. To be clear, I'm talking about Summer McIntosh, the 14-year-old swimming dynamo. At the 2021 Canadian Olympic Swimming Trials this past weekend, she made history, winning the women's 200-meter freestyle. Not only did she secure her a spot to represent Canada this summer at Tokyo, Summer now holds the fastest 200-meter freestyle time in the history by a female swimmer aged 15 and under. She also ranks second as the second fastest Canadian woman of all time in the event. Summer slammed it again in the 800-meter race. Her time of 8 minutes, 29.49 seconds was almost 4 seconds under the Olympic standard needed for Tokyo. All eyes will be on her today as she takes on the 1,500 meters. Summer comes to swimming naturally. The daughter of Jill Horsted, who swam for Canada in the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games at age 17. Summer has followed in her mother's footsteps and will make our country and our community in Etobicoke Lakeshore proud as part of the Canadian team. Mr. Speaker, this summer is going to be great. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Montmagny.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-L'islay. Mr. Speaker, it's with a heavy heart that I speak to my colleagues today and all Canadians who are listening to us. First, my deepest condolences go to the families and friends of Benjamin. I learned earlier this week that a third man took his life in my region this week, even though the lockdown is well underway and summer preparations are underway. This man decided to end his life. Asking for help takes strength. It's not a weakness. For you who are suffering, who saw nothing but darkness, and who feel alone, call people, speak out, open up your hearts so that we can help you. We don't know what's happening behind your big smiles. We're here for you. There is hope and we love you. Sometimes we're clumsy, but we're still there. We're hoping that there'll be a hotline, Mr. Speaker. In the meantime, call 1-866. Call if you need help. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for HoC. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 400 years ago, St. John's Day on June 24th was celebrated in Quebec with bonfires lit across the St. Lawrence River. Now a national holiday for Quebecers of all origins, it celebrates our deep attachment to the nation that we form. For me, Quebec's national holiday has always been an important celebration of this nation that I chose and that welcomed me nearly 40 years ago when I immigrated from Chile with my mother. Living Quebec, Long Live Quebec, Tightly Woven is this year's theme. It's because we are tightly woven that we have witnessed great solidarity in HoC and throughout Quebec. Organizations such as HoC Community Kitchen that delivered hundreds of meals and helped their citizens, I would like to say thank you. It is with great enthusiasm that I invite you to promote this Quebec nation, which from generation to generation expresses its pride, solidarity, and attachment to its language and culture. To all Quebecers, happy national holiday, and of course, go Habs go!
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of many of the struggling businesses, particularly those in the tourism sector, who have been impacted by the lack of communication and non-existent border opening strategy in this country. Trickstar Productions, one of the 133 tourism and hospitality businesses in my riding, are heavily reliant on cross-border revenue to operate, and they will not see a light at the end of the tunnel until this government implements a concrete plan with benchmarks and measurables to reopen the U.S.-Canadian border safely and effectively. This government has refused to listen to the recommendations of their own public health advisors, who argued maintenance of supply chains and services as one of the reasons against a rapid border closure. The tourism and travel industry account for $43 billion of our GDP. U.S. visitors contribute $1.9 billion. We cannot deploy a full economic recovery until we safely and strategically execute a plan on a border reopen. We need a plan. And we need it now, or our economy and this people of the country will continue to suffer the consequences.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, on this day, 36 years ago, June 23, 1985, a bomb exploded on Air India Flight 182 connecting Toronto to New Delhi. The mid-air explosion killed all 329 passengers. The majority of victims were Canadians, including 82 children under the age of 13. Two of the victims, Kalbir Kaur Minhas and Balwinder Kaur Minhas, were my relatives. The bombing was the single worst terrorist act in the history of Canada. A judicial inquiry determined the bombing was a Canadian tragedy and the largest mass murder in Canadian history. To acknowledge the tragedy, June 23rd was declared as a National Day of Remembrance for victims of terrorism. Sadly, every year the list of victims grows larger. terrorists continue to target innocent people to further their causes. The recent attack in London was a horrific reminder that Canada must continue to stamp out terrorism in all its forms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Congratulations to all the high school graduates from the many high schools in Edmonton Strathcona. We are always proud of our high school graduates, but for the class of 2021, I want to give a particular shout out. You are all incredible for working so hard and accomplishing so much this year. In the midst of a global pandemic, you have demonstrated your determination and completed your high school diploma. An example of our phenomenal graduates is Nimra Huda, the 2021 Strathcona Leadership Award recipient. Nimra, like so many students in Edmonton Strathcona, represents the very best of our youth. She empowers youth in our community. She works with residents in long-term care, and she contributes so much to Old Strathcona Academic High School and to the broader Edmonton community. Congratulations to Nimra and to all the amazing graduates in Edmonton Strathcona. You've overcome so many challenges this year, and these lessons will guide you in whatever future you choose. Take a moment to appreciate this accomplishment. You've earned it, and you deserve it.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This session is coming to an end, marked by the pandemic. Quebec will be experiencing its second national holiday, threatened by a virus that is now resorbing. But there are still celebrations. Our nation also thrives through diversity. The efforts and discipline that we have shown seem to be bearing fruit. This will be like a liberation for us. In Quebec, the national holiday always feels somewhat like a liberation. On behalf of all workers and elected officials of the Bloc, I would like to wish each of you a wonderful national holiday. To Quebecers, to Indigenous nations, and to all those who love Quebec with the passion of the future that we dream of together, on June 24th, Quebec will turn blue. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, 25 new Liberal MPs were elected in October 2019, and I don't think they quite knew what they were getting into. In the last 20 months, they have stood right alongside the corruption of a tired Prime Minister plagued by scandal with no plan to secure the future of Canada. They said nothing as their Prime Minister ignored four parliamentary orders, to hand over documents related to the Level 4 lab in Winnipeg. They seem unconcerned that their government was found in contempt of Parliament. They said nothing when their government tried to give $500 million to the We charity, which paid the Trudeau family $500,000. They stood by a defense minister that has absolutely failed to send a clear message to the most powerful men in our military that the status quo is no longer acceptable. That is the record of the new Liberal MPs, Mr. Speaker, and Conservatives will do whatever we can to replace the corrupt government with one that will put the needs of Canadian families first and secure our future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bona Vista, Buren Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House today and recognize a true hero in my right. Wayne Ansel, fire chief of the town. Come by chance, volunteer fire.
I'm going to interrupt the honourable member. There seems to be a technical issue there. Maybe I'll let him try again, and we'll try again because we can't make out anything that's being said, unfortunately, and we want to hear the message.
So start over, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House today. Recognize.
I'm going to ask the honourable member to try unplugging and replugging the headset. There we go. Now we'll get to hear the whole message.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bona Vista, Buren Trinity.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House today to recognize a true hero in my riding. Dwayne Antle is the current fire chief of the town of Come By Chance, a volunteer fire department, and he was named the 2020 recipient of the Canadian Volunteer Firefighters Services Association's a Lifetime Achievement Award. Dwayne has served as a firefighter for the past 27 years and is the current president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Fire Services. Mr. Speaker, Dwayne truly does exemplify what community service means, and I cannot think of a better person to be recognized with this award, and also as the first Newfoundlander and Labradorian to do so. I was honored to present Chief Antle his national award earlier this month at a dinner hosted by his hometown. Congratulations again, Dwayne. We all celebrate you and this accomplishment, and thank you for what you do for our communities and towns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, for 5 years, the Canadian Armed Forces has struggled with Operation Honour, trying to address sexual misconduct and a culture of covering it up. 2 chiefs of defence staff have been terminated. There's been a cover-up in the Prime Minister's office that we've asked questions about, and now a troubling question for the Prime Minister. Can he confirm to this House that the Minister of National Defence has never hired someone that was previously dismissed from an employer for sexual misconduct?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Defence has spent a lifetime serving his country, first as a police officer, then a decorated soldier who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and now as a member of Parliament. He, along with the rest of our government, has been working hard to push back against sexual harassment and sexual intimidation, to work to change the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces and indeed the culture of systemic discrimination around all of our institutions. We all have much more work to do, but we will continue to stay focused on making sure that everyone has a safe workplace.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
If you're going to change the culture of a workplace with respect to sexual harassment, you have to show zero tolerance. So I'll ask the Prime Minister again because he avoided answering my question. Did the Minister of National Defence hire someone that had been previously dismissed from an employer for sexual misconduct? It's a simple question. The men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces deserve a response from their Prime Minister.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the men and women of the armed forces deserve to work in an environment free from misogyny and intimidation and unacceptable actions. That is something we all have long known, but as we know, there is still much more work to do. Over the past years, we have taken significant steps to change the culture in the armed forces, and just this year we have done even more. Whether it was appointing Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan to head up the Centre for Professional Conduct and Culture, appointing Louise Arbour for an independent review of the treatment of sexual misconduct, or committing over $236 million to transform the culture, we will continue to do the work necessary.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the men and women in our armed forces deserve respect. They deserve the truth. I will repeat, this time in French, my question for the 3rd time. Did the Minister of Defense hire a man who had been fired for reasons of sexual misconduct previously? Yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for years, we have been working together to transform the culture not only in our armed forces, but also within all of our institutions in Canada. We have taken concrete action to offer more support to all those who are going through moments of bullying, assault, and intimidation. We will continue to do so. With regard to the armed forces, we have taken concrete action. Whether it be appointing Lieutenant General Carignan, Justice Louise Arbour, or whether it be implementing Justice Fish's recommendations. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
See the cover-up of sexual misconduct investigations and allegations continue with the Prime Minister's response today. The other cover-up of this Prime Minister goes to helping his friends and making sure Liberal insiders get ahead at the expense of everyday Canadians. Recently, the Liberal Party had to confirm that the Prime Minister's office have given contracts of at least $100,000 to his close friend, Mr. Tom Pitfield. This from a Prime Minister who promised sunny ways and transparency, Mr. Speaker. So let me ask the Prime Minister another simple question, see if I can get a response. Has the government ever given any additional taxpayer money to his friend, Tom Pitfield?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as everyone in this House knows, MPs have important work to do on behalf of their constituents. They need to keep track of concerns as well as of issues that need to be addressed. As we have stated clearly, the system used by our MPs is for constituency casework management only, with a complete separation between political and parliamentary work. We've always ensured that all rules are followed. While this is an inconvenient fact for the Conservative Party, that won't prevent them from making unfounded attacks.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Unfounded attacks, Mr. Speaker. I have two additional contracts from the Minister of Natural Resources, the Minister of Indigenous Services, all close friends with Tom Pitfield themselves. All were in the Prime Minister's wedding party, Mr. Speaker. There's only one rule with this Prime Minister, is advancing the interests of lobbyists and friends connected to the Prime Minister, and another lineup for everyone else. Conservatives are proposing transparency and anti-corruption laws, Mr. Speaker, which are needed after countless scandals by this government. So my question is simple to the Prime Minister. Will he commit to Canadians that he and his cabinet will never break another law?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While Conservative politicians are focused on baseless personal attacks, our steadfast focus has been on delivering for Canadians by getting progressive bills passed. We've been focused on getting supports out in the budget to Canadians, by reaching net zero by 2050, on banning conversion therapy, and on making web giants pay their fair share for our artists and more. These are the things we are focused on, Mr. Speaker, focused on Canadians, while Conservatives are focused on me.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's the last day of the session, and I'd like to wish you and all of our colleagues in this House an excellent summer. Summer is the time to go meet with our constituents and listen to their concerns. And summer is also the time to take a step back and think and reflect. Therefore, I would ask the Prime Minister to take the next few weeks or months to reflect on the following. Does he think that creating 2 classes of seniors is a good idea? Why not, when we come back, increase the old age pension for all seniors as of 65 years of age? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this government in 2015, we have always been responsive to the needs of seniors. They have been a priority. Whether it be increasing the guaranteed revenue supplement by 10% when we arrived in government, or whether it be doing more for the health and dignity of seniors, or whether it be increasing old age security by 10% for seniors over 75, we will continue to be there to support our seniors. We know that this last year has been difficult for everyone, but particularly for our seniors. This summer, as always, I will be there for our seniors, and I look forward to working directly with them. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. This Prime Minister has increased seniors' concerns, but not their benefits. Right now, we're trying to help the Prime Minister. We're trying to be constructive. There has been a terrible pandemic, which has had a direct impact on millions of Quebecers and Canadians, as well as on the health system and health professionals. We owe them so much. Will the Prime Minister take advantage of the summer to seriously consider increasing health transfers to 35%, as Quebec and all the provinces are asking? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for his question. Indeed, he and I, along with all members in this House, have worked together to ensure that we have been able to send billions of dollars to the provinces for their health systems. We were there to provide $8 out of $10 of all the help offered to Canadians during the pandemic.
And that was with the support of all parties in the House. We were there in the short term during the crisis for health systems throughout the country, and we will continue to be there in the long term. As I said, we will launch discussions to increase health transfers in the years to come. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
This Prime Minister is going to cut the help that families need by $800 while we are still going through this pandemic. Yet, on the other hand, this Prime Minister has not prosecuted a single case of fiscal evasion from the ultra-rich. It's clear who this Prime Minister is defending. This Prime Minister has often said he's got the backs of Canadians. It's not having their backs to cut the help they need while we are still in this pandemic. So will the Prime Minister reverse this callous cut to the help that people need while we are still in the pandemic?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Despite the rhetoric of the NDP, we had a very simple and straightforward focus for Canadians from the beginning of this pandemic, that we would have their backs. And that's exactly what we've done, with billions upon billions of dollars of supports for workers, for families, for seniors, for young people. To help Canadians get through this pandemic, the budget 2021 proposes to extend the Canada Recovery Benefit up to 50 weeks and the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit up to weeks. That's why we thank the parties in the House who are working with us to pass Budget 2021 so we can continue to support Canadians as long as is necessary into the fall and beyond.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
It's not just people who rely on the CRB that this Prime Minister is failing. This Prime Minister has failed Indigenous people time and time again. And one of the most glaring examples is clean drinking water for Indigenous people. The promise was first made in 2015. 6 years later, that promise was broken. And now the Prime Minister promises another 5 years. 11 years to get Indigenous people clean drinking water in one of the wealthiest countries in the world during the 21st century. It is outrageous and it is wrong. Will the Prime Minister admit that the only reason Indigenous people do not have access to clean drinking water is because it's not a priority for him and his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we see a perfect example of the kind of rhetoric that the NDP engages in. The reality is we all recognize, and this government recognizes, there is much more to do. But to ask a question about clean drinking water without recognizing that when we came into office, there were about 100 long-term boil water advisories in this country, and we have since lifted 108 long-term boil water advisories, some that have been in place for years and years and years. Yes, Mr. Speaker, there is more to do, but to pretend nothing has been done is simply disingenuous and cynical politics at its worst.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, Canada is supposed to be a wealthy country. However, according to the COVID Misery Index, recently updated by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Canada is suffering much more than comparable countries from self-imposed and disproportionate economic harm due to the pandemic. Retail sales have decreased by 5.7% from March to April, which represents the highest decrease from 1 month to the next. When will the government admit that it is the cause of these economic problems? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see that the Conservatives don't understand anything about how Canada got through this pandemic. From the beginning, we said that we would be there to support Canadians. We were there for millions of workers with the CERB. We were there for small businesses with the wage subsidy. We were there for seniors and for youth. And the result? Well, the result has been that we've been able to return to jobs and prosperity much more quickly than many comparable countries. And that is why we entered this pandemic in a better budgetary position than many other countries. And we are also coming out of it with a better fiscal position. We have been there for Canadians, and that is how we got through the pandemic. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government has been neglecting the heart and soul of our economy, small businesses which have been suffering for months. They have accumulated hundreds of billions of dollars of debt, and thousands of them have had to close. Canadians cannot wait any longer for the Liberal promise of an economic recovery to come true. They need help now. Why is this government refusing to take action? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is very surprising to hear this question coming from the Conservatives, Because for months, the Conservative Party has been complaining that we invest too much in Canadians, that we have invested too much in small businesses. If this Conservative member takes the summer, as we will be doing, to go meet with small businesses in his riding, he will be sure to see that thanks to the federal government's direct aid, things are much better than they would have been, and some businesses were able to get through the pandemic quite well. Of course, too many small businesses suffered and had difficulties, but we were there for each other, and that is how Canadians have got through this pandemic. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, our current inflation rate is 3.6%. That is the highest in a decade. The Liberals also promised to create 1 million jobs, but the only thing that's increasing is actually the size of the debt. The Liberal slogan in 2019 was choose Fords. Today I would say that it's more like choose backwards, because right now it's like we're going back to the stagflation of the 1970s. When will the Liberals realize that they need to do something? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased that the Conservatives recognize that something must be done. And what they should do this afternoon, indeed, is vote for the budget. Because Canadians need the extension of the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and income supports until the end of the month of September. But the Conservatives don't seem to care. They are continuing to play petty political games instead of helping Canadians. I hope that they will turn this around and support our budget bill. I hope that they will support Canadians for once.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the inflation rate in Canada is at a 10-year high, which means the cost of everything is going up: food, groceries, gas, services. Yet Canadian paychecks are stagnant, and worse yet, unemployment is still climbing despite the government's massive deficit spending. Over 3 million Canadians are collecting unemployment benefits from this government, with young people, women, and new Canadians facing the worst of it. This is the Prime Minister's economic record, Mr. Speaker, and he's presented really no plan to get Canadians back to work. Why? Why is there no real plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the plan has been very simple from the beginning. Have Canadians' backs as much as it takes, as long as it takes to get through this pandemic. And that's exactly what we've done, despite not only the non-support from the Conservatives, which we will see, unfortunately, yet again this afternoon when they vote against extending the supports to Canadians through this summer and into the fall, but also as they completely misunderstand that it is through supporting Canadians, supporting small businesses with government investments that we actually come back stronger and faster. And that has always been our approach, to support Canadians, to raise taxes on the wealthy, lower them for the middle class, which Conservatives voted against, and every day since.
Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own budget promised to create 1 million jobs by the end of this month. How's that going? Has he followed through on that commitment? No. In fact, we're losing jobs, and all employment gains made by women in my lifetime have been completely wiped out. So that really is the Prime Minister's record on women and employment in this country. And it is clear the government cannot be trusted to fix this economy, no matter how much money they spend. So I'm going to ask him again, where is the plan to secure the future for Canadians, Mr. Speaker?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the plan was in Budget 2021, which was a plan to create jobs, grow the middle class, and ensure long-term growth, including by extending supports to Canadians through the summer into the fall. Unfortunately, the Conservatives will be voting against extending those benefits. That's their vision of a strong recovery. But in terms of job numbers, let's look at the stats. As of May, 81% of COVID-19 job losses were recovered, compared to 66% in the U.S. As of May, 2.4 million jobs of the 3 million jobs lost at the peak of the pandemic have now been recouped. We have more to do, Mr. Speaker, more people to help, and we will do just that despite the Conservatives' blockage.
Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister still has failed on his commitment to create 1 million jobs by this month, and it's important that he remember that. And really, after a year of absolute devastation of our economy, our personal freedoms, and of course the health of Canadians, Canadians are falling further and further behind. And yet, again, we have seen no real plan to get our country back to work in all sectors of our economy and all demographics. Rather, the Prime Minister seems busy with scandals and corruption and picking winners and losers. Again, I'll say he has no real plan to secure the future of Canadians, and Canadians deserve to know this. So why is it that the Prime Minister is bungling our economy and the recovery of it so badly and leaving so many Canadians behind?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the Conservatives continue to resort to personal and partisan attacks, we're going to stay focused on helping Canadians. The plan we laid out to build back a stronger Canada was Budget 2021, which included investments in childcare, which include investments in supporting workers. And right now, the Budget Implementation Act that we will vote on this afternoon extends the supports for small businesses, for workers, for Canadians through the months of this summer and into the fall. The Conservatives say they want to help Canadians, but they'll be voting against extending those benefits to Canadians. They are busy attacking on personal levels, not busy taking care of Canadians. Fortunately,
L'honorable député de Saint-Jean.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, throughout the session, Quebec has mobilized to demand that the Charter of the French language apply to businesses under federal jurisdiction. The Government of Quebec tabled its Bill 96. The National Assembly, like most of the population, unanimously supported Bill 101 in federal workplaces. Even the House of Commons joined that consensus, which is a historic first. All that's missing is the Prime Minister. Tomorrow is our national holiday. Will the Prime Minister seize the opportunity to support our bill, which would make French the only language of work in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as a proud Québécois, I am looking forward to celebrating the national holiday tomorrow. And I wish all Francophones in the country a happy Saint-Jean. We all have also high hopes for the Habs tomorrow at the Bell Centre. So we are looking forward to an excellent celebration for everyone. Now, with regard to the French language, we recognized in the throne speech and in our official languages legislation that we need to protect French throughout the country, including in Quebec, while also protecting official language minority communities throughout the country. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, it is Bill 101 that is the only legislation that can protect French in Quebec and that makes French the language of work throughout Quebec. The Federal Official Languages Act does not protect French, it protects bilingualism, which undermines the necessity of using French in Quebec. And yet, in November, the Prime Minister said the following: for Canada to be bilingual, Quebec needs to be primarily Francophone. That is why we support Bill 101 in regards to what it does for Quebec. So I have a simple question for the Prime Minister. What has changed since November? Why doesn't he support Bill 101 anymore? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that is simply false. Indeed, we recognize how important it is to protect French in Quebec as well as throughout the country if we want Canada to remain a bilingual country. And that is why we have brought forward a reform to the Official Languages Act, which will protect French as well as official language minority communities throughout the country. That has always been a concern for us. And I congratulate the Government of Quebec for its work to protect French, but the Government of Canada needs to protect French not only in Quebec but throughout the country, and that is what we're doing.
Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When a significant Ebola outbreak happened in Africa, a Conservative government took decisive action and closed Canada's borders to keep us safe, in spite of protests from the Liberals. We didn't send vital PPE away when we needed it, say that border measures didn't work, or have a wee charity scandal. So when the Prime Minister this morning said that Canada would have reacted very differently if a Conservative government had been in charge during the pandemic, he was probably right. So instead of deflecting blame in this way, will the Prime Minister take a little bit of accountability for some of the major policy errors that he's made over the last 18 months?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said from the beginning, in this unprecedented global crisis, in this unprecedented pandemic, we moved quickly and as best we possibly could to support Canadians. But there are plenty of things we needed to learn from, plenty of things we could have done differently, and hopefully governments will learn and do differently in the future. But every step of the way, we were guided by one straightforward principle. We would have Canadians' backs, and we would listen to science as we did it. That was the approach the Liberal Party took. The last Conservative government slashed science and cut supports from most vulnerable Canadians. It would have been a very different pandemic had they been in power this time.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, he's right. We wouldn't have let vaccine manufacturing capacity atrophy. We wouldn't have raided vaccines from the COVID fund. We wouldn't have sent PPE abroad and put our doctors and nurses at risk. We wouldn't have given contracts to cronies while Canadians suffered. And now, while our tourism and airline industries suffer, he's still pretending like everything's okay. He's subjecting Canadians to the unsafe quarantine hotel program and hasn't provided benchmarks for lifting federal COVID-19 restrictions. Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to inform the member of the opposition that, in fact, we have moved forward on easing restrictions for fully vaccinated travelers. This is an important step in reopening our economy safely and securely, being able to start traveling again. I think everyone is excited to see vaccination rates rise across the country. And I hope the honourable member will join with me in encouraging everyone to get vaccinated, to get 2 doses of the vaccines so that we can continue to progress, to reopen, to monitor carefully how we can keep Canadians safe through the tail end of this pandemic while at the same time.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, to inform the Prime Minister, on behalf of the tourism industry, the airline industry, families who are separated across borders, the hotel quarantine program, which is unsafe and unscientific, still remains. And instead of staying at one of them, the Prime Minister went to his own special place. And it's this sort of double standard and lack of accountability that is putting Canadian business at risk, and it's costing Canadians their mental health. So no, they have not provided benchmarks for lifting federal COVID-19 restrictions, and it's their responsibility to do so. They have recommendations from an expert panel. When will the Prime
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I know the member opposite looks forward to traveling again, perhaps to Oklahoma. The reality is we have made steps every step of the way to both keep Canadians safe and ensure that we support our tourism industry, our travel industry that has been so hard hit. That's why billions of dollars in supports to small businesses, to airlines, to Canadians across the country who've faced job losses because of this pandemic. We have had Canadians' backs, and we will continue while at the same time progressing in a smart, thoughtful way to keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
It's easy for this Prime Minister to take personal shots at people. It's a lot harder for him to have empathy for Canadians who need jobs that are dependent on the tourism sector, for families who are separated across the border. And I mean, he kind of flaunted that lack of empathy when he was taking pictures with Stella McCartney. We need benchmarks for lifting federal COVID-19 restrictions, not snarky comments from the Prime Minister. So I'll ask him, in the best interest of Canadians, when will he be providing benchmarks for lifting COVID-19 restrictions within federal jurisdictions, including border measures?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It might be easier for people to believe Conservatives when they talk about empathy if they hadn't spent much of this pandemic criticizing this government for having spent too much too quickly to support Canadians, saying things like we shouldn't have been supporting individual Canadians, we should have just been supporting businesses. Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we have had Canadians' backs. We have kept people safe, and we have ensured that the reopening goes as smoothly and as quickly as is safe. We will continue to monitor case numbers in this country, vaccination levels, situations of variants of concern both here and around the world, and work closely with our partners as we move forward responsibly.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
La crise du logement.
The housing crisis is hitting Canadians hard. Now only 1/3 of people are able to buy a house in Canada. 20% of the houses bought in Canada are being bought by real estate companies. Why isn't the Prime Minister tackling the housing crisis with the measures that are really needed to help people? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since we came to office in 2015, we have tackled the housing crisis. We had a Conservative government before which had refused to make any investments in housing across the country. But the reality is that for far too many people, becoming a homeowner is still not just a dream. We've been working with all levels of government to make housing more affordable. We are building new affordable housing as part of programs like the Rapid Housing Program. We are setting up incentives for first-time home buyers and encouraging taxes on vacant houses, and many other things. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Prime Minister, the housing prices have increased more in Canada than pretty much anywhere else in the world. He also failed when it came to pharmacare. He campaigned on pharmacare in 2019, even included it in the throne speech. When New Democrats gave him an opportunity to actually vote on it, he voted against it, siding with large, wealthy, big pharma companies. Now, the only people that benefit were big pharma, so can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians who are desperate to afford their medication, why does he keep siding with big pharma and hurting people?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, once again, I have to remind the NDP that we side with the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes the provincial responsibility for delivering health care. But that didn't stop us throughout this pandemic from being there with billions of dollars of supports for the provinces so that they could give Canadians the health care support that they needed. And indeed, over the years, we have worked with the provinces to drive down the cost of drugs, while at the same time moving forward on a rare disease, high-cost drug strategy. We will continue to work with the provinces to make sure that nobody ever has to choose between medications and paying their rent. This is what
the Honourable Member for Whitby.
Mr. Speaker, as we come to the end of this parliamentary session, as well as out of the third wave, it is time to reflect on what we have accomplished this past session. Despite the challenges, I'm proud of this government and everything we did to protect Canadian families, jobs, and businesses at the height of the pandemic. This government created historical programs to help Canada weather the storm, although we're not through it yet. Can the Prime Minister please share with us how these programs have helped Canadians and what we are doing to ensure that we keep supporting businesses, the workers they employ, and the communities they serve?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to begin by thanking the member for Whitby for his extraordinary hard work on behalf of his community. Crucial programs like the emergency wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and lockdown support have helped protect millions of jobs, supported Canadian small and medium-sized businesses so that they can serve their communities, and positioned Canada for a strong recovery. Our plan to extend business supports and introduce the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program will continue to help Canadian businesses, workers, and families. We have always been there for Canadians, and we will always be there for them throughout and beyond this pandemic.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
6 years ago, when these Liberals formed government, the Prime Minister promised sunny ways and ethical governance. Instead, Canadians got cover-ups and the most corrupt government in our country's history. What's worse is that the Prime Minister is so arrogant that he thinks that he can fool Canadians. His record speaks for itself, but let's give the Prime Minister a chance here. Can he look Canadians straight in the eye and tell them he has been the Prime Minister of good, ethical governance?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservatives continue to focus on partisan attacks while we remain focused on them. Today, we're going to be voting on emergency supports for Canadians and to help Canadian businesses and our economy recover. We know the Conservative Party opposes the budget and will be voting against those supports. Yesterday, we saw over half of their caucus vote against a bill to ban the harmful practice of conversion therapy. And late last night, we saw their party vote against historic legislation in the fight against climate change. While the Conservative Party focuses on me, we're going to stay focused on what Canadians need, and that is the supports of a strong, progressive government.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
What Canadians need is an ethical prime minister, and they don't have one right now. He's been the prime minister of corruption and cover-ups, twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws. He took illegal vacations to Billionaire Island. He interfered in the criminal prosecution of his friends at SNC-Lavalin, did everything he could to give money to his friends at the WE organization, all for his own political gain. Under this government, there's been two sets of rules, one for the Liberals and Liberal insiders, and one for the rest of Canadians. So will the Prime Minister admit that his corruption has failed Canadians and disgraced the office of Prime Minister?
The honourable member for Leeds, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate to see the Conservative Party spewing facts and baseless misinformation and twisting the facts. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, Canadians have had a really difficult year because of this pandemic, but this government and other orders of governments have worked together to support them. I am proud of the work that we've done with provinces right across the country, regardless of partisan allegiance, to deliver for Canadians. We have stayed focused on supporting people through this pandemic and now focused on building back better. While Conservatives make personal attacks, we'll stay focused on Canadians.
Honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I think Canadians could do with the Prime Minister to spew something. Facts would be a good place to start. And under this Prime Minister, Ottawa has become a backdrop to his ethical breaches. Under this Prime Minister, Ottawa has become an ATM for Liberal insiders. And while Canadians are struggling and being left behind, the circle of insiders close to the Prime Minister line their pockets and are laughing all the way to the bank. These Liberals will always help their friends to jump the queue and to get the inside track. So when will the Prime Minister put the needs of Canadians first instead of the needs of Liberal insiders?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You know, Mr. Speaker, very few Canadians actually listen much to the Conservative Party of Canada, but it's interesting to hear Conservatives themselves not listen to the Conservative Party of Canada because they spend half their time explaining to Canadians how this government is spending far too much in supports for workers, for small businesses, for Canadians to recover this economy. And the other time they're saying we're not doing nearly enough to support Canadians through this pandemic. No wonder Canadians wonder what the Conservative Party stands for, because they know what our government stands for having Canadians' backs every step of the way. That's what we've done through this pandemic, and that's what we'll do through this recovery.
Honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, how far he's fallen, Mr. Speaker. In 2015, he said Conservatives were his neighbours and friends. In 2019, more Canadians voted for the Conservative Party than anyone else. But, of course, nobody is listening to the Conservatives. It sounds like this Prime Minister isn't listening to Canadians. But if there's an ethics law that's been broken, this Prime Minister probably had his hands in it. And if there's a contract to be had, he gave it to a Liberal. If Liberal insiders need a bailout, you better believe they're going to get it from this Prime Minister. Conservatives are ready to clean up Ottawa and bring back good, ethical governance. So will the Prime Minister get out of the way and let Conservatives finally secure accountability in Ottawa?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I was waiting for him to say drain the swamp, but I know that's in the next sentence if we'd only had a few more seconds. Listen, while Conservative politicians opt for baseless partisan attacks, our steadfast focus is on delivering for Canadians by getting progressive bills passed. We're getting supports in the budget for Canadians. We're reaching net zero by 2050. We're banning conversion therapy, which half the Conservative caucus voted against, and we're making sure that web giants pay their fair share and support Canadian creators. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party is more interested in partisan attacks and misinformation than on getting the job done for Canadians.
I just want to remind the honourable members in the chamber that I'd like to hear the responses and the questions as well. It's getting a little noisy. I'm having a hard time. So out of respect for everyone who does want to hear, just ask everyone to maybe talk a little bit lower amongst themselves. L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister appealed to the progressiveness of opposition parties in order to get his bills passed. Well, with the opposition's help, he has passed 9 bills since June 1st, including Bill C-10, which would have died on the order paper without the Bloc Québécois. Now it's his turn. People who are sick often need up to 50 weeks of special EI sickness benefits. That's what our Bill C-265 would do. But in order for this bill to pass, the Prime Minister must give it a royal recommendation. So I appeal to his progressiveness and his humanity. Will the Prime Minister give Bill C-265 a royal recommendation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that many Canadians are facing prolonged illness and that they need more support than simply the 15 weeks that are provided in EI for them. That's why we promised during the election campaign and in the speech from the throne to extend those sickness benefits for Canadians in difficulty. In Budget 2021, we announced that we would be extending those 15 weeks up to 26 weeks, Mr. Speaker. That's support for Canadians that we are proud to provide, and we will continue to work to give people the support that they need. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, at the end of her life, Émilie Sans Façon was fighting two battles. One was for her life as she struggled against cancer, and the other was for 50 weeks of special health benefits for people who are sick. The Prime Minister met Émilie, and he knows exactly what she's been through. Unfortunately, Émilie lost her first battle. Now the Prime Minister can make sure that she wins her second battle. Mr. Speaker, I appeal to the Prime Minister's compassion. Will he increase the special benefits up to 50 weeks? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it was an honour for me to sit down with Émilie Sans Façon and to hear her plea and to understand her passion not only for protecting people like herself, but also for countries all across the country facing serious illness. That's why we have moved forward with extending special sickness benefits from 15 to 26 weeks. I know there's still more to do, and we will continue to work on it. But this is a big step forward, and it was important for me and for all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, there's been another major development in the Winnipeg lab case. It involves a researcher who was fired and escorted out by the RCMP. The National Post has reported this morning that a researcher worked with the Chinese government on two inventions that were patented in China. Now, according to Canadian law, anyone who works with the foreign government like this has to declare it to the federal government, and the federal government has to provide its authorization. So my question is for the Prime Minister. Did his government give the authorization to this researcher to work with China? Yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I also saw this concerning report this morning. I asked the Minister to follow up in order to figure out exactly what happened. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, Mr. Speaker, finally the government has done something right on this file. But aren't they aware that in doing this, they're demonstrating that what happened in Winnipeg just didn't make sense? And Canadians who read the National Post, like him this morning, did find this concerning. Well, 38 million Canadians think this is a problem. If we want to get to the bottom of this, we need to start by having those documents tabled in the House of Commons. So why did the Prime Minister flout the House's order? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we tabled all of those documents. They were unredacted and they were tabled to parliamentarians through the National Security Committee. We are currently working with the other parties to find a way to ensure both national security and access to information so that people can get answers to these questions. We are very open to continuing to work with the other parties to ensure that they can do this important work, and I'm certainly looking forward to this all being resolved. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, well, we're also looking forward to having this resolved. But the problem is that the government isn't listening. The Prime Minister created his own committee, and he's the one who can decide what becomes public. So that's not real parliamentary work. Real parliamentary work, Mr. Speaker, means respecting the orders passed in this House, which the Prime Minister did not do on 4 separate occasions. Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister aware that when he flouts the orders of the House, how can Canadians respect the laws that are passed in this House? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable member across the way takes our responsibility to protect national security seriously. I also know that he would never want to endanger our national security systems or those who work to protect Canada in sometimes very high-risk jobs around the world. That's why we always need to ensure that while we allow parliamentarians to do their work, we also protect national security. To do so, we provided a number of solutions and ways of doing this to both have transparency and to protect national security. The Honourable Member from Marc-Aurèle-Fortin. Mr. Speaker, as Quebecers prepare to celebrate Saint-Jean-Baptiste tomorrow, we can be proud of a federal government that defends, protects, and promotes the French language. I'm proud that our government has introduced Bill C-32, which will modernize the Official Languages Act for the 21st century. Could the Prime Minister tell this House how this bill will establish real equality between our two official languages? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Marc-Aurèle-Fortin for this excellent question, and I also want to wish all Quebecers a very happy Saint-Jean-Baptiste Day. Our bill, C-32, is committed to ensuring real equality between our two official languages, whether it's strengthening French in our federal institutions, helping Francophones work and receive services in French, or ensuring that Supreme Court justices are bilingual. We're doing our part to protect and promote French across the country, including in Quebec, while also protecting minority communities across the country.
An illegal trip to a billionaire's island. The SNC-Lavalin scandal. $1 million to friends at the We charity, and a 3-year cover-up of sexual misconduct allegations in the Canadian Armed Forces. And now, stories about hundreds of thousands of dollars of contract to one of the Prime Minister's closest personal friends. Under his leadership, ethics investigations have to be numbered, Mr. Speaker. The day the Prime Minister's third judgment came out, Bill Morneau's second came out. Leadership starts at the top, so I want to ask leader to leader, does the Prime Minister feel that his personal ethical conduct sets a bad example for the members of Parliament on his team?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that in the midst of a global pandemic, in the midst of challenges Canadians are facing, whether it's climate change, which the Conservative Party continues to deny, or whether it's systemic racism, which the Conservative Party continues to deny, or supports for Canadians, which Conservatives are going to be voting against in the upcoming budget vote, they have been focused more on political, partisan attacks and personal attacks than they have on supporting Canadians. Leadership is about being there for Canadians, and that is something that we have done from the very beginning. We said we'd have Canadians' backs through this pandemic. That's exactly what we've had. We will have their backs as we move forward and beyond this pandemic to build back better.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Personal attacks, Mr. Speaker? All I'm asking is for the Prime Minister of Canada to follow the law. Is it too much now, after 6 years, that I ask the leader of this country to simply obey the laws of this country? The only backs he has had, Mr. Speaker, consistently as Prime Minister are those of friends of his family, of close insiders, and connected lobbyists. There's one lineup for the friends of the Prime Minister on the Liberal list, and there's another lineup for everyday Canadians who are struggling. It's time to restore accountability. Will the Prime Minister commit to never again break the law?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see what Conservatives are focused on. We see that they're focused on personal attacks, on partisan attacks, on spreading mud as broadly as they can to try and see what sticks, while we on this side of the House stay focused on supports for Canadians, on delivering the necessary supports for students, for seniors, for workers, on being there for small businesses with the CEBA, with the wage subsidy, on making sure that Canadians are properly supported through this pandemic and into the recovery, while at the same time Conservatives kept screaming at us every step of the way that we were spending.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's sad when the Prime Minister refers to 3 reports, investigations issued by the Ethics Commissioner of this country as throwing mud. Those were investigations into the conduct of the Prime Minister. He's failed time after time on an ethical standard. Canadians want leadership. They want accountability. He's now forcing his MPs to pay his friend's company, Mr. Speaker. He's now putting his unethical conduct at the core of the Liberal government. Canadians deserve accountability, transparency, and ethics. That is what they will get from a Conservative government.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want politicians to be focused on them, on their needs, and that's what we've done every step of the way. The Conservative Party never looks further than an opportunity to attack, to break down, to undermine, and to spread baseless allegations. We instead will do as we've always done, which is roll up our sleeves and do the hard work of being there for Canadians, of getting through this historic pandemic and building back better so that everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed. Let him continue to focus on me, Mr. Speaker. I'll continue to focus on Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, I am so proud. In this Parliament alone, we have brought forward legislation to end the harmful practice of anti-LGBTQ2 conversion therapy, reach net zero emissions by 2050, support Canadian content creators, address systemic racism in our justice system, and provide Canadians record supports during the pandemic. Time and time again, the Conservative Party has shown their true colours and chosen partisan delay tactics over progress for Canadians. Can the Prime Minister please provide an update on the important legislation passed in this House?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Davenport for her question, but also for her tremendously strong work in her community. The member is absolutely correct. We have been moving forward progressive legislation to support Canadians and build a greener, more inclusive Canada. Just yesterday, this House passed legislation to ban conversion therapy. Unfortunately, over half of the Conservative caucus refused to support the LGBT community and voted against it. And late last night, we passed historic legislation in the fight against climate change, and all of the Conservative Party voted against that. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will keep fighting for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The fact that seniors and our loved ones in long-term care bore the brunt of this pandemic is a national shame. People are outraged at the conditions in long-term care, but not surprised because these conditions were there long before the pandemic. The pandemic simply exposed those horrible conditions. The Prime Minister said that this is an important issue, but has not done anything to make people's lives better. Why hasn't the Prime Minister acted on this vital issue to protect seniors by removing profit from long-term care, by establishing national standards of best practices? Why hasn't he acted?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the NDP promotes a dangerous sort of cynicism to believe that absolutely nothing has been done. I recognize there is more to do. But we have delivered on our promise to increase old age security for Canadians aged 75 plus. We will issue seniors a one-time $500 payment in August and increase their OAS by 10% in July of 2022. We'll also create a new Age Well at Home initiative to fund senior-led community groups that help seniors seniors age at home. And we will invest $3 billion to support provinces and territories to ensure that standards for long-term care are applied and permanent changes are made. We will continue on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, to support seniors.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. And while I have your attention, if I may, I think members will agree that this has been a most unusual time for us all. For more than a year, we and our fellow Canadians have faced a number of challenges, and I know there will be more to come. But as we prepare to focus on our families and our constituents, I want to take a moment to thank all those who have made it possible for us to continue our work during this pandemic.
On behalf of all members, I extend my sincerest thanks to the employees of the administration, without whom we could not have been able to continue our work. The interpreters, the IT team, the maintenance staff, the clerks and the pages, the members of the Parliamentary Protection Service, and the broadcasting team. All of them have given us the means to fulfill our functions confidently and securely.
All of us, members and those who support them, have earned a pause. I wish everyone a safe and restful summer and time to connect with your loved ones. Thank you. And now we'll continue. Hopefully that will have calmed everyone down. We're all peaceful now. And the honourable member for Banff Airdrie is rising on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as we, of course, are approaching the end of our session for the summer, I note that there are 4 outstanding points of privilege. There is a point of privilege from the member for Timmins James Bay in relation to the government ignoring a House order regarding taking Indigenous children to court. There is a point of privilege from the member for Carleton regarding the government's inflation tax. And from the member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, that's a mouthful, that one, regarding the Ethics Committee and the fact that the government has ordered staff there to disobey the order to appear. And then, of course, there was a point of privilege from our opposition House Leader as well related to the documents related to the Winnipeg lab after, of course, the appearance at the bar by the head of the Public Health Agency of Canada on Monday. While I appreciate that some of these obviously do contain, you have some deliberations to have on some of them. That's understandable, Mr. Speaker. In particular, the one from the opposition House Leader. First of all, I will note that there is some new information that has come to light as well, and that is that the government has now filed an order in federal court with you as the defendant, Mr. Speaker, where they're seeking to have those records and those documents sealed so that they can be hidden from Canadians. That obviously adds a very significant element of timeliness to this because when you have that being done by the government, they've gone to that length to actually go to the federal court against yourself, Mr. Speaker, to try to see those documents sealed so that they cannot be seen by Canadians. That would add a very important element of timeliness to this. And I do believe that it does seem like in that particular point of privilege in particular, there is a pretty clear set of facts there. You had brought the head of the Public Health Agency of Canada to the bar. You admonished him. The documents were supposed to come with him. They did not. That is very clear. That's a very clear set of facts, very well established. We now have the government going to court to try to seal those documents, and that is shameful, frankly. And I would say that I would think that there is a very clear evidence there that we do have a prima facie case, so would have expected that we would have seen a ruling from you prior to the summer adjournment of Parliament. And so I just want to ask, Mr. Speaker, a 3-part question so that we can get some clarity on where things are at with these points of privilege. Will you, in fact, be delivering a ruling, particularly on that point of privilege, given the timeliness of that matter now, and on the other points of privilege as well that I've raised here? And if not, can you tell the House why not? And if, in addition on that, what would happen with those points of privilege should the government do, as has been very widely speculated, and go ahead and dissolve Parliament for an election? What would then happen to those points of privilege? So I do certainly hope, given that the government has now gone to a federal court against yourself as the defendant, Mr. Speaker, trying to seal those documents, that you will, in fact, deliver a ruling prior to the summer. But if you can answer those questions, please.
I want to thank the honourable member for his question, and it certainly is a fair question. Unfortunately, over the last week, the amount of resources required from the clerks and myself has limited the resources that we have to put to the points of order and the points of privilege. And one of the things I've prided myself in being here is putting out a well thought out and a well thought out response that merits the location of the position that I'm in. And one of the things that I did not want to do is to rush through that with limited resource and give an answer or give a ruling that was not it was not up to the level that is expected from members, and members have been used to. So I will not be able to, should Parliament dissolve today, I will not be able to do it right away. It will be done at the next sitting of the House, whenever that does happen. And we will have something that is very robust and something that makes sense and something that I think all members can have confidence in. Okay, another point of order, please go ahead.
So just in relation to the last question that I had, what in fact is maybe more of a point of clarification than anything, but what in fact would happen with those points of privilege should the government choose to dissolve this Parliament and go to an election? Would those points of privilege carry forward into the next Parliament? What would happen to those, first of all? And second of all, what effect does the fact that the government has in fact applied to the federal court to have those documents sealed have on this, and what bearing does it have on this? Are you, does that change in fact anything about this point of privilege, about your ruling, and are you concerned about the fact that those documents the government has applied to have them sealed, and what effect that would have obviously on this place and its ability to follow through on its orders, because that is a very serious matter when a government is taking the Speaker of the House of Commons to federal court in order to try to seal documents so that they can avoid being held accountable to Canadians. That is something we all must take incredibly seriously in this place, because the very heart of democracy is at stake.
Very good. I want to thank the honourable member for Banff Airdrie. I just wanted to make sure we got everything exactly the way it should be, or the answer is correct. The points of privilege and the points of order will be carried over, and it'll be up to the Speaker at the time to look at it and take all the information as it evolves and actually make a decision at that time. And I would want to take that away from whoever the next Speaker is. And on the second point is we were told by the government House Leader, he announced it in the chamber, and it is in the process, and we'll be taking that under consideration as we proceed. L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, to be quite honest, when I was informed of this a few minutes ago, I could hardly believe it, because what's going on here is that the government is preventing the House of Commons from accomplishing an order that the House itself issued. We understand that there are different opinions on certain things. That is part of public debate. But an order of the House is always an order of the House, and nothing less. And to see it legally challenged by the Government of Canada, well, it's completely unbelievable. As a member of this House, since you are our representative in these legal proceedings, in this case, Government of Canada versus the House of Commons, may I know what position you will take?
Comme j'ai dit tantôt,
as mentioned earlier to the other honourable member, once again, there are further issues here, and I will take this into consideration for the final decision, but I'm not ready at the moment to grant a decision because it will not be completely have been thought out. If the honourable member looks at my previous decisions, I hope that these rulings were well thought out. I hope he will agree with that. I hope that he will find that they were written in good faith and based on the facts, and I want to continue like that. Now, I can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but for now, I'm going to be continuing to act as though we were simply continuing in the House after this. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent, point of order. Mr. Speaker, there have been times when we completely agreed with your decisions, and other times when we completely disagreed with your rulings. But we trust in your ability to make rulings based on facts and precedent and good sense. But my question was not about your decision based on our request. My question was regarding the legal proceedings initiated by the Liberal government. Your name has currently been raised in an order of the court, and you're going to have to bear witness on Monday in a case which involves the Government of Canada versus the House of Commons. To my knowledge, that's the first time this is happening. And it reminds us of what happened on Pennsylvania Avenue in 1974 in the U.S. There's a real conflict of interest here because, to my knowledge, the government is also part of the House of Commons. And now the government has launched legal proceedings in order to seal documents that an order of the House has demanded to be made public and tabled here in the House. I believe that the House of Commons should defend this institution. The House of Commons should respect the work done. The House of Commons should be able to respect its own orders. As a result, I would strongly urge you to clearly defend the right of parliamentarians, the rights of parliamentarians and the rights of the House of Commons in this legal situation, a situation where the government has directly placed the House of Commons. To my knowledge, it's the first time that this is happening, and as a parliamentarian, I find this curious, not to say unacceptable, that the government dares to launch legal proceedings against an order of the House of Commons. The question remains the same. If the government does not respect the orders of the House of Commons, then why should Canadians respect the laws voted on by the House of Commons?
J'aimerais rappeler aux députés qu'une des choses qui est très importante.
I would remind the member that it is very important within this House that the Speaker's office will defend the rights of the House. That is something that I take very seriously. Now, these matters are in the hands of the law clerk, and we will proceed in this manner. But the honourable member is right. The rights of the House are very important, and we will continue to protect them.
Halton Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, I just have a very short intervention on this point, and that is that I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the issue in front of us regarding privilege, regarding your ruling earlier this week, that the government, that in finding a prima facie case of privilege with respect to the government's failure to obey the June 2nd order of this House, as well as the new information that's come to light today that the federal government has gone to court to seal the documents ordered by the House, both on June 2nd and last week, is a matter of public interest. I believe that this is a matter of serious public interest, a matter of consequential public interest, because this matter concerns the rights and privileges of this House guaranteed under our Constitution. And so as we move forward to adjournment today as per the House schedule, and we go into the summer, I ask that you would keep that in mind as this situation unfolds, that this is a matter of urgent and serious public interest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I want to thank the honourable member, and I want to assure him that it is a very important matter, and it is an urgent matter that is being dealt with by our legal team. The honourable member, I have some more on that are calling or that have their hands up from home. Is this concerning this matter as well, or is it on other matters? No? Okay. The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the defender of all of our rights and privileges here, I know that it's not an easy task, but I would just say that part of the way that this institution works is that if a member experiences where their privileges have been violated, that it is incumbent upon that member to immediately raise it with the Speaker at the earliest opportunity. Mr. Speaker, obviously with the clock being at what it is a principle that I believe that the Speaker should prioritize, that the fact that by the order being defied by the government by not bringing those documents, that immediately, Mr. Speaker, all of our rights and privileges have been violated. And I believe that it is